Before we start, comment down where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let's begin. They say small towns never really let you leave. They just wait for you to circle back when you're tired enough to notice the cracks. For me, that town was Cedar Ridge, Ohio, and the Walmart on Route 47 sat right at the edge of it like a concrete bookmark in a life. I thought I'd already finished reading. I hadn't planned on being there that night. In truth, I hadn't planned on being back in Cedar Ridge at all. But funerals have a way of rearranging schedules, and when my uncle passed that September, I found myself sleeping in my childhood bedroom again, staring at glow-in-the-dark stars I never bothered to scrape off the ceiling. The house was empty in a way that felt louder than noise. By 10:30 p.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys, told myself I needed toothpaste, and drove toward the only place still lit up like it believed in tomorrow. The Walmart parking lot was half full, scattered with pickup trucks, a few sedans, and the unmistakable hum of night shift life. The automatic doors slid open with a familiar sigh, and for a moment I felt something close to relief. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered. Same harsh fluorescent lights, same faint smell of rubber, popcorn, and floor cleaner. A teenager leaned against the self-checkout podium scrolling, his phone like nothing in the world could possibly go wrong. Somewhere overhead, an intercom crackled with a garbled announcement no one listened to. I grabbed a card even though I didn't need one, mostly to give my hand something to do. I drifted through aisles without purpose. Cereal I didn't eat, office supplies I didn't need. The frozen section hummed steadily, a low mechanical breathing that made the space feel alive. A couple argued quietly near the ice cream freezers. An older man studied reading. Glasses like the answer to something important might be printed on the back. It all felt so painfully normal that I almost laughed at myself for needing this place to calm down. That's when I noticed the woman near the pharmacy counter. She wasn't shopping. She stood still, clutching her purse with both hands, eyes fixed on the front of the store. Her posture was rigid, like she was bracing for impact. At first I assumed anxiety or maybe exhaustion, but then I saw her flinch when someone laughed nearby. Hard. Too hard. A few aisles over, a man paced back and forth near automotive supplies. He checked his phone, slid it into his jacket, then checked it again seconds later. His movements had a sharpness to them, like everything he did was slightly out of sync with the room. I told myself I was projecting, that grief makes you suspicious of shadows. Still, my chest tightened. I pushed my cart toward the household goods aisle, telling myself to hurry up and leave. Toothpaste. That was the plan. In and out. But as I turned the corner, the lights flickered once, just enough to make the store feel fragile. And in that brief dimming, I understood something without knowing why. This was going to be a night I'd remember. The first sound didn't register as danger. It was a sharp metallic bang, distant enough to be mistaken for a pallet hitting the floor or a freezer door slamming shut. A few heads turned. No one screamed yet. That hesitation, that collective pause where everyone waits for context, is what I remember most. The human instinct to normalize things, even when your body already knows better. Then came the second sound. Louder, closer, followed by a scream that cut through the store with such raw panic that it stripped the space of its artificial calm. The hum of the freezers suddenly felt obscene, like background music playing over something sacred and wrong. People moved all at once. Carts abandoned. Items dropped. Someone yelled, "Get down," though no one knew where down was supposed to be. I ducked behind a pallet of paper towels, my heart hammering so hard it blurred my vision. My hands shook violently, the cart rolling away from me like it wanted no part of this. Another crack echoed. Unmistakable now. A gunshot. The sound didn't just hit my ears. It pressed into my chest, vibrating through bone and muscle. I peeked through a tear in the plastic wrapping and saw the man from automotive sprinting toward the front registers. He had a handgun raised awkwardly, like he wasn't fully used to its weight. His face wasn't angry, it was frantic, eyes wide and unfocused, as if he were chasing something invisible. An employee screamed from near customer service. Someone fell. I couldn't tell who. A woman crawled past me, whispering prayers under her breath. Mascara streaked down her cheeks like ink bleeding on paper. The teenager from self-checkout was gone. The podium stood empty. A blinking screen asking if someone needed assistance. Instinct finally kicked in. I moved low, pushing myself along the floor toward the back of the store. My knees scraped against linoleum. Somewhere nearby, glass shattered. The intercom crackled to life, then died mid-syllable. Silence followed, heavy and unnatural, broken only by sobbing and hurried footsteps. I reached the garden center doors with two other strangers huddled beside me. No one spoke. One of them pulled on the handle, hands slick with sweat. It didn't budge at first. Panic surged, hot and suffocating. Then it opened, and cold night air rushed in like a mercy. We ran. Outside, the world looked insultingly normal. Cars passed on the highway. A breeze rustled the trees. We collapsed behind stacks of mulch, gasping, waiting for sirens that felt impossibly far away. When they finally came, red and blue lights washed over the parking lot, painting everything unreal. Nothing terrible happened again. That's the part people don't understand. Trauma doesn't require repetition to stay alive. It survives just fine on memory, on the knowledge that randomness isn't rare, that violence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits patiently between aisles, hiding behind the most ordinary routines. Months later, I ran out of toothpaste at midnight. I stood in my bathroom staring at the empty tube, weighing the options. For a long moment, I considered the 24-hour store down the road. Then I shook my head and went to bed. Morning came. The sun rose, the world carried on. I bought toothpaste at 9 a.m. under soft lighting, with children asking for candy and employees complaining about schedules. It was unremarkable. Safe even, but as I walked back to my car, I understood something I hadn't before. Some places never change, we do. And once you've seen how quickly the ordinary can fracture, you learn to treat comfort zones with caution, not fear, awareness. Because danger doesn't always crash through the door. Sometimes it blends in, waits its turn, and reminds you, far too late, that familiarity is not the same thing as safety. I didn't think a Walmart in West Texas could feel lonely. But the one off Interstate 20 managed it. It sat just far enough from Midland to feel detached, like it belonged more to the highway than the town itself. I found it during a stretch of my life when everything felt temporary. Job, apartment, relationships. I was working contract maintenance for wind farms, moving every few months, living out of duffel bags and gas station coffee. Walmart was the one constant. No matter where I landed, it looked the same. That night, the wind had been relentless, pushing dust across the parking lot in low spirals. It was just past midnight, my shift finished late, stomach empty. The automatic doors opened and closed behind me, sealing out the howl of the planes. Inside, the store felt oddly compressed, like the air had nowhere to go. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the floor gleamed with fresh mop streaks that hadn't fully dried. I grabbed a basket and headed toward the deli, hoping for something warm that didn't come from a microwave. Most of the hot case was empty, save for a few sad-looking rotisserie chickens under heat lamps. A single employee wiped down counters with slow, tired movements, earbuds dangling around her neck but not playing anything. She nodded at me without lifting her eyes. There weren't many customers. A trucker comparing energy drinks, a couple of teenagers daring each other to ride the carts, an older woman carefully counting bills at self-checkout, lips moving as she did the math. Everything about the scene suggested boredom, routine, the quiet end of another forgettable day. I noticed the man by the entrance only because he hadn't come in. He stood just inside the sliding doors, staring out into the parking lot like he was waiting for a sign. His jacket was too heavy for the weather, zipped all the way up despite the warmth inside. Every time the doors opened, he flinched, then relaxed again when it wasn't who he was expecting. I told myself it wasn't my business. Long nights make people strange. I moved on, tossing a packaged sandwich into my basket and heading for the drink aisle. Halfway there, the lights dimmed briefly. Not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to make a few people look up. Somewhere near the front, a voice rose, sharp, angry, but it cut off before I could make out words. I stopped walking. The store seemed to hold its breath. Even the teenagers froze, grins slipping from their faces. The employee at the deli straightened, pulling one earbud free. The man by the door turned inward now, posture stiff, hand disappearing into his jacket. That's when I realized I was standing too far from an exit and too close to something. I didn't understand yet. My basket suddenly felt heavy. I set it down carefully, like noise itself might trigger whatever was coming next. I didn't know it then, but this Walmart, this lonely, wind-battered stop along the highway, was about to become the place I'd measure silence against for the rest of my life. The shouting returned, louder this time, cutting through the store with an edge that made everyone flinch. It came from near the entrance, two voices overlapping, one pleading, the other tight and furious. I took a step back toward the freezer aisle, instinct pulling me away from open space. My pulse thudded in my ears, steady and insistent. Then a loud bang echoed across the front of the store. Not sharp like a gunshot, but heavy, like something solid slamming against metal. A cart overturned. Someone screamed anyway. Panic doesn't wait for confirmation. People scattered in different directions, abandoning baskets and carts as if they'd suddenly turned dangerous. The teenagers bolted toward the back, laughter gone, faces pale. The trucker dropped his drinks, cans rolling across the floor with hollow clacks that sounded absurdly loud. I crouched behind a freezer door, peering through the glass. The man from the entrance had moved farther inside now. His jacket was open, one hand gripping something dark and solid. Not a gun, I realized with a strange surge of relief, but a long metal wrench, the kind you'd find in automotive. He swung it wildly, shouting at someone I couldn't see, his words slurred together by rage and desperation. An employee stood between him and the registers, hands raised, trying to calm him down. "Sir, please," she said, voice shaking but firm. "You need to leave." Her badge trembled against her shirt as she spoke. The man took another step forward. The wrench hit the floor as his grip faltered, the sound ringing out like a bell. For a second I thought it was over, that someone would rush him, restrain him, restore order. Instead he lunged. Shelving rattled as people ducked and ran. I slid along the freezer case, heart racing, shoes squeaking against the tile. A woman fell near the dairy section, her groceries spilling everywhere. I grabbed her arm and pulled her up without thinking, our eyes meeting briefly. Wide, terrified, grateful. Then we split off in opposite directions. Security arrived too late and too cautious, shouting commands that bounced uselessly off the walls. Someone called 911. Another employee cried openly near the service desk. The man swung again, catching a display stand and sending it crashing down. Chaos filled the space where boredom had lived minutes before. I made it to the back hallway near receiving, pressed flat against the wall as footsteps thundered past. My hands were numb. My mouth tasted like copper. Somewhere nearby, the man was still yelling, his voice breaking, unraveling. I heard him sob once, a raw animal sound that cut through the fear in a way nothing else had. Then police sirens wailed outside, growing louder fast. The man froze, his shoulders slumped, the wrench slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor again. Officers flooded in, weapons raised, shouting commands. He dropped to his knees without resistance. I slid down the wall, breathing hard, realizing only then that my legs were shaking uncontrollably. The store fell into an uneasy quiet, broken by sobs and radios crackling. It was over, but the echo of it wasn't going anywhere. The police kept us inside longer than I expected. We stood in small clusters, strangers bound together by adrenaline and shared silence. An officer moved from group to group, taking statements, asking the same careful questions. I answered automatically, my voice flat, like I was reciting something I'd memorized. When it was over, they told us we could leave through the garden center. The front entrance was taped off, its bright doors closed like a mouth refusing to speak. Outside, the wind had picked up again, carrying dust across the lot in sharp, stinging gusts. Red and blue lights pulsed against the storefront, painting the building in alternating warnings. I sat in my truck for several minutes before turning the key, hands resting uselessly on the steering wheel. My phone buzzed with a notification from work. I ignored it. The next day, the story was small. A disturbance, no serious injuries. The man had been intoxicated, grieving, unstable. Pick your explanation. People online debated whether security had acted fast enough, whether the store needed more guards. I recognized none of it. None of the commentary matched what it felt like to be there, to watch boredom turn into danger without warning. I finished my contract 2 weeks later and moved on to the next town. The next wind farm, same routines, same long drives, same late nights, but something had shifted. I stopped going into stores after dark. I ordered groceries ahead or waited until daylight. When I did walk through a Walmart, I caught myself scanning faces, watching hands, listening for raised voices. The sameness of the stores no longer comforted me. Instead, it unsettled me. If something like that could happen in one, it could happen in any of them. The sameness meant nowhere was special. Nowhere was exempt. Months passed, the memory dulled, but it never disappeared. Sometimes when the wind howled across the plains at night, it carried that echo with it. The bang, the shouting, the wrench hitting the floor. Other times it showed up in smaller ways. A flinch, a sudden urge to leave a place that felt fine a second earlier. Eventually, I realized the man hadn't frightened me as much as the unpredictability had, the way normalcy dissolved without warning. One moment you're choosing a drink, the next you're calculating exits. I still work the road. I still pass Walmarts glowing off the highway, identical beacons in the dark. Sometimes I stop, sometimes I don't, but I never linger anymore. I get what I need and leave, grateful for the quiet when it holds, because once you've watched the ordinary tip into chaos, you understand how thin the line really is, and how easily it can disappear under fluorescent lights and desert wind. The Walmart in Clearwater, Florida was never quiet, not even at night. It sat less than 3 miles from the beach, which meant the parking lot was a rotating cast of tourists, locals, delivery vans, and people who looked like they hadn't decided where they were sleeping yet. It was loud, messy, bright, and unlike the other Walmarts I'd known, this one didn't pretend to be calm. I was there because my flight had been delayed 12 hours. My suitcase was already checked. My hotel checkout time had passed. The airline handed me a meal voucher that barely covered a bottle of water and an apology. By midnight, I was sunburned, irritated, and carrying everything I owned in a backpack that smelled like sunscreen. Walmart wasn't a refuge, it was just somewhere to sit without being asked to leave. Inside, the store buzzed with life. A group of college kids argued loudly near electronics. A woman FaceTimed someone on speaker while comparing shampoos. A barefoot man slept on a bench near the bathrooms, his duffel bag wrapped tightly around one arm. The air felt humid even indoors, thick with sweat and salt and fried food from the nearby hot bar. I bought nothing, I wandered. There was something comforting about being anonymous there. No one cared who I was or why I was killing time at 12:47 a.m. I leaned against a pillar near seasonal items, scrolling my phone, watching the chaos orbit around me. Employees moved fast, sharp-eyed, used to managing energy like this. Security guards didn't stand still. They patrolled. That's when I noticed the girl. She was maybe 16 or 17, standing alone by the luggage display, fingers tracing the zipper of a cheap rolling suitcase. She wore a hoodie 2 sizes too big and flip-flops that slapped softly against the floor when she shifted her weight. Every few seconds she glanced over her shoulder, not nervously but deliberately, like she was checking for someone specific. I assumed an argument with parents, a runaway fantasy. Florida was full of those stories. Then a man approached her. He smiled too quickly, said something I couldn't hear. She stiffened. Her hand tightened on the suitcase handle. He reached for it, casual, practiced. She shook her head and stepped back. Something in my stomach dropped. This wasn't loud. This wasn't chaotic. This was quiet and controlled and happening in plain sight, which somehow made it worse. People walked past without noticing. Or maybe they noticed and decided it wasn't their problem. The man leaned in closer, his voice low. The girl looked around again, eyes scanning, searching. For help, I realized, or maybe just a witness. Our eyes met for half a second. And in that moment I understood this story wasn't going to be about noise or panic or sirens. It was going to be about choice. About whether someone steps in or keeps walking when danger doesn't announce itself. I pushed myself off the pillar, not knowing yet how this would end, only that if I did nothing, I'd remember it forever. I didn't confront him, not right away. That's the part people expect, the dramatic step forward, the raised voice. Instead, I did something quieter. I walked closer and pretended the girl was already with me. "There you are," I said, keeping my tone light, annoyed even, like she'd wandered off. "I told you not to leave the aisle." The man turned toward me, smile still in place, but his eyes sharpened. The kind of look that measures risk. The girl froze for a fraction of a second, then nodded quickly, stepping closer to my side, close enough that I could feel her arm trembling against mine. "I don't know you," the man said calmly. Too calmly. "That's fine," I replied. "I know her." It was a lie balanced on a knife's edge. Around us, the store kept moving. Laughter from electronics. A cart rattling past. Life continuing with impressive indifference. I expected him to back off immediately. Instead, he laughed softly and took another step closer. "She was asking me for help," he said. "Suitcase is busted." The girl shook her head hard. "No, I wasn't." Her voice cracked. "That did it?" I raised my voice just enough to carry. "She's a minor," I said. I didn't know if that was true, but the word minor has weight, and she's with me, so I'm gonna need you to step away. People started to look. Not stare, just glance. Attention is a fragile thing, but sometimes it's enough. The man's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked toward the security desk near the front of the store. For a long second I thought he might argue, or grab the suitcase, or do something worse. Instead, he lifted his hands slightly, palms out. "Relax," he said, misunderstanding. He walked away without another word, disappearing into the crowd like he'd never existed. The girl exhaled sharply and sagged against the luggage display. Her knees looked like they might give out. I guided her to a bench near the photo center, my heart finally catching up to what had almost happened. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded, then shook her head. "I think so." We sat there in silence for a moment, then words came out in pieces. She'd missed a bus. Her phone was dead. She didn't want to call home. She didn't know where to go. Walmart had felt safe enough. Security arrived, alerted by someone who'd noticed the raised voices. The girl tensed again, panic flashing across her face, but the guard spoke gently, crouching to her level. He asked questions. He offered water. He called a supervisor. Police came later. Not with sirens, not with urgency, just procedure. I stayed until her aunt arrived, breathless and furious and relieved all at once. The girl hugged me before she left, quick and fierce, like she was afraid to linger. When it was over, I walked back through the store alone. Nothing was broken, nothing taped off, no headlines waiting to be written. But I knew better now. Not all danger is loud. Some of it waits for you to look away. I left the store and stepped into the humid Florida night, the neon lights from the signage bleeding into the dark like someone had spilled paint. The ocean breeze carried a faint salt smell, and somewhere a car alarm wailed, blending with the late-night hum of traffic. Everything looked ordinary. Too ordinary. That was the hardest part, recognizing that nothing had exploded, no alarms had rung, and yet the encounter had left an invisible mark. I walked to my hotel in silence, backpack feeling heavier than it should. My hands itched to fidget, to check my phone repeatedly, to replay the moment again and again. It wasn't adrenaline I was feeling. It was awareness, that sharp, insistent kind that forces you to notice the small details everyone else overlooks. The girl's trembling hand, the way the man's eyes had measured me, the subtle shift in the store's rhythm, the instant danger hovered nearby. It stayed with me. The next morning, the world seemed unaware. Tourists pushed carts loaded with snacks and souvenirs. Employees restocked shelves, chatting about sales and weekend plans. Security walked past with that same practiced, calm stride, like the previous night had never happened, and in a sense it hadn't, at least not for anyone else. For me, though, it had changed the way I would navigate crowded spaces, the way I would measure strangers, and the way I would consider silence and sound. Weeks later, I thought about going back to the Walmart, not for food or supplies, but to remind myself that the ordinary could exist alongside fear, that you could survive these moments and still walk forward. I never did. Every time I passed it on the way to the airport, I felt the same subtle tension in my chest, a quiet reminder that some experiences do not fade. They embed themselves in the margins of your attention, reshaping how you move through the world. I returned to traveling, to work, to temporary homes, carrying with me the knowledge that danger isn't always dramatic. It isn't always a crash, a bang, or a scream. Sometimes it's quiet, measured, waiting for someone else to notice or intervene. Sometimes it's the choice of a stranger who steps in and changes the course of a night. And that lesson, the quiet, almost invisible weight of responsibility and awareness, is something I carry every time I step into a store at night. The ordinary isn't always safe, but it is always worth respecting. Sometimes, just showing up for someone, even in a small, quiet way, can make all the difference. Walmart had been a backdrop for chaos before. This time it was a stage for vigilance, a reminder that safety isn't given, it's maintained by the choices we make when no one else is watching. I never thought a Walmart could feel like a trap, until the one in North Little Rock did. It was late summer, just past 11 p.m., and the rain had been falling steadily for hours, turning the parking lot into a slick mirror. I'd stopped because my car's wipers were struggling and because I needed snacks for the drive home. That was the plan. Simple. Innocent. Inside, the store smelled like fried chicken and bleach, with a faint undertone of wet asphalt seeping in through the automatic doors. The fluorescent lights flickered in the humidity, giving everything a slightly uneven glow, like the world was off balance. Not many customers wandered these aisles at that hour. Just me, a few late-night shoppers, and a stock clerk replacing drinks in the cooler. I grabbed a basket and wandered aimlessly. Chips, soda, some granola bars, nothing important. I noticed a man near the electronics section, tall, thin, wearing a hoodie that looked like it had been bleached by the sun. He wasn't browsing, just standing still, staring at the wall of headphones as though memorizing something. I chalked it up to weird behavior. The late-night store attracts its fair share. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible but persistent. Someone was muttering just behind the shelves where I was standing. I paused. There was a woman crouched by the cleaning supplies aisle, clutching a small backpack to her chest. Her eyes darted nervously and her lips moved in sync with the whisper. She looked like she was practicing a mantra or repeating something under duress. I approached cautiously. "Are you okay?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Her head snapped up, wide-eyed, and she shook her head. I just need to get out of here," she whispered. Something clicked in my chest. That calm, routine shopping trip had morphed into something else entirely. Like a silent alarm I couldn't ignore. Around us, the store hummed on as if nothing was happening. A man pushed a cart past the frozen foods, whistling, unaware. A teenager leaned against the display for candy bars, scrolling through his phone. Normalcy. And yet the quiet between aisles felt wrong. I gestured toward the exit. "Follow me, it's okay." Her hand hesitated above the backpack zipper. The man near electronics shifted almost imperceptibly, as though sensing movement in the air. The fluorescent lights flickered again. That moment, the pause before anything happens, is always the longest. It stretches seconds into an eternity, and in that time you realize ordinary spaces can hide urgent danger in plain sight. I took a deep breath. "Come on," I said, and led her toward the main aisle, feeling the weight of every shadow along the way. Something told me tonight, Walmart wouldn't just be about snacks and fluorescent lights. Something told me this night would leave a mark, not on the store but on both of us. We moved cautiously down the aisle, keeping low, eyes scanning. The woman clutched her backpack like it was a lifeline, and every few steps, she glanced over her shoulder. The man near electronics had disappeared, but the sense of being watched lingered, sharp and heavy. The store's hum, refrigerators, fluorescent buzz, distant footsteps, had become a soundtrack to tension, each sound amplified, threatening. A cart rolled past us with an unexpected squeal and we both flinched. She whispered, He's still here." Her voice was tight, trembling, barely audible over the white noise of the store. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't want to know yet. All that mattered was moving her somewhere safe, somewhere visible, somewhere the shadows couldn't swallow her. We turned a corner into the toy aisle, past rows of dolls and board games. A single light overhead flickered once, and I caught a glimpse of the man again. He wasn't aggressive yet, just watching, calculating. His stance was casual, but it carried the weight of intent. The realization hit me like ice. This wasn't random. He had chosen her. I guided her behind a display of boxed puzzles, crouching low. My pulse thumped in my ears. I whispered, "Okay, we wait. Don't make a sound. Just breathe." Her shoulders shook. I reached out, lightly resting a hand on hers. "I've got you." Minutes stretched, though it felt like hours. Every time someone passed, we froze, holding our breath. The man moved closer, weaving through the aisles, looking like he was following some mental map. He paused near a stack of video games, scanning, then moved again. My stomach tightened. A store employee emerged from the back with a cart, oblivious to the tension. The man turned abruptly, his attention snapping toward the employee, and for a moment, he hesitated. That pause was enough. I led the woman toward the nearest exit, moving silently, quickly, blending into the routine chaos of a late-night Walmart. At the sliding doors, we paused, listening. Rain had slowed outside, but the parking lot was slick, empty except for a lone car. I gestured toward the edge of the lot and we ran, crouched low, sprinting toward the relative safety of light and open space. Behind us, the man paused at the doors, watching, then turned and disappeared back into the aisles. We didn't stop until we reached the edge of the lot. She sank to the pavement, rain soaking her hair, her breathing ragged. I realized then that the danger had been subtle, almost invisible, yet it had left us both shaken in ways that shouting and chaos never could. And in that moment I understood. Some nights Walmart isn't just a store. It's a maze of hidden threats. And survival sometimes depends on quiet, deliberate choices rather than dramatic heroics. We stayed on the wet pavement for a few minutes, catching our breath, letting the rain wash over us. The lights of the store glowed in the distance, deceptively normal, almost inviting. I wanted to look back to see if the man had followed, but something told me he wouldn't. He wasn't after confrontation. He thrived on the quiet, on hesitation, on control. Leaving him in the store where he could blend back into shadows was the safest move for both of us. the woman finally spoke, her voice shaky but gaining strength. "Thank you," she said. I didn't know what to do." She hugged her backpack to her chest again, then forced a laugh that sounded like relief. "I thought I was trapped." I nodded, not saying anything. Words felt inadequate. Sometimes just being there is enough. Sometimes safety is silent, not heroic. She called someone on a working phone nearby, a relative who promised to pick her up. I stayed until the car arrived, watching her leave, feeling a strange weight settle in my chest. Not fear, exactly. Awareness, knowledge, a reminder that ordinary spaces, aisles lined with snacks, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, mundane shelves stacked with common goods, can hide urgent danger in plain sight. As I walked back to my hotel through the rain-soaked lot, I realized how much Walmart had changed for me. It wasn't the fluorescent lights, the endless aisles, or the bargain bins that stood out. It was the way small, quiet choices could shape survival, the way attention and presence could tip the scales without anyone else noticing. By morning, the store was back to normal. Employees stocked shelves, early shoppers wandered in for coffee and breakfast, and life moved at its ordinary pace. To everyone else, the night had been uneventful. To me, it had been transformative. I left Clearwater a few days later, carrying that night with me. It followed me in subtle ways. The extra caution when walking past strangers in stores, the instinct to note exits, the awareness that not all threats announce themselves with noise or violence. Some hide in silence and observation in the spaces everyone assumes are safe. And sometimes it takes a quiet act, guiding someone stepping forward just enough to make a difference. Walmart, in that moment, had been a lesson more than a store. A reminder that the ordinary can be fragile, that vigilance can save lives, and that sometimes survival is built on subtle, almost invisible choices rather than heroics. From that night on, whenever I walked into a store after dark, I carried the awareness with me. Not fear exactly, just recognition. Because danger doesn't always scream. It often whispers between the aisles, waiting for the moment someone notices, and noticing quietly can be enough. The Walmart in Peoria, Illinois, looked like every other Walmart I'd ever known. Fluorescent, wide, organized chaos lurking behind its neatness. But that summer night, it had a different feel. The air outside was muggy, thick with humidity, and the parking lot glistened from an earlier rainstorm. I had pulled in late, my car low on gas, and my stomach grumbling from hours of driving. I didn't expect anything to happen, just a quick stop for snacks and maybe a soda. Inside, the store smelled of fried food, plastic, and the faint tang of cleaning chemicals. Fluorescent lights hummed above, flickering occasionally as if struggling against the oppressive heat. I grabbed a cart and began wandering. Chips, candy, energy drinks. Nothing significant, just comfort food for the long night ahead. Most of the customers were couples or small groups moving lazily between aisles. A young man in a baseball cap studied the cereal section, comparing brands with exaggerated care. A woman with earbuds bobbed her head in rhythm to music only she could hear, stacking her cart with household items. The place was alive but oddly hollow. That's when I noticed him. A man leaning against the end of an aisle near cleaning supplies. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket despite the warmth. His hands were stuffed into his pockets, and he moved subtly, glancing from aisle to aisle as if mapping the store in his mind. I didn't feel threatened yet, just a prickling sense of awareness, that small gut warning that something wasn't right. I continued walking, picking up a soda, but kept an eye on him. The way he lingered, detached yet alert, set off a quiet alarm in my chest. Customers passed between us without noticing. Employees moved mechanically, restocking shelves or answering phones. Life in Walmart carried on. Then, without warning, the man started walking deliberately, quickly toward the front of the store. He passed a family looking at toys and a clerk stacking paper towels. No one paid attention, but I noticed a teenager at the electronics counter flinch as he passed. Something was about to happen. I didn't have time to think. By the time I reached the beverage aisle, a loud crash echoed from the front. Metal on tile, sharp and sudden. People screamed. A display of bottled water had been knocked over. Cans rolled across the floor. The man had swung something, maybe a metal rod, maybe a pipe, at the shelves, sending chaos rippling outward. I ducked behind a freezer, my heart hammering. The familiar fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, too harsh, exposing everything, leaving nowhere to hide. Around me, Shoppers scattered, some screaming, some frozen, some racing for the doors. My instincts took over. This was no longer a store. It was a minefield, and every step could trigger disaster. I realized then that ordinary places, aisles of chips, shelves of cleaning supplies, humming freezers, could become arenas of panic in seconds. And tonight, Walmart had just turned into one. The man moved faster now, swinging the metal rod with reckless precision. Every clang against the shelves sent a jolt through the store, echoing like a warning. People scattered in all directions, carts clattering, products tumbling. Screams cut through the air, high and panicked, while fluorescent lights flickered overhead, throwing strange shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. I crawled behind a display of laundry detergent, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst through my chest. A woman and her child dashed past, the child crying, the woman's voice cracking as she called out, "Stay down!" I swallowed hard and stayed low, trying not to breathe too loudly, trying to make myself invisible. The man's eyes were wild, scanning the aisles, searching. He wasn't attacking everyone, it wasn't random. He seemed to be hunting for someone, but it didn't matter. The chaos he created enveloped anyone nearby. I watched him pass a rack of frozen meals, narrowly missing a falling stack of pizza boxes. The sound made my stomach turn. Then a loud crash came from the front. The registers were in chaos. A clerk had tried to intervene, raising her hands in a futile gesture of authority. The man swung again, sending a display of cleaning supplies toppling over, shattering bottles across the floor. The chemical smell mixed with the already heavy scent of fried food, creating a sharp, almost nauseating aroma. Instinct kicked in. I needed an exit. I edged toward the garden center doors, ducking behind shelves, moving as quietly as I could. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. Another shopper sprinted past, nearly knocking me over, and I stumbled, cursing under my breath, trying to remain unseen. As I reached the corner, the man paused. He looked around, breathing heavily, eyes darting, clearly frustrated, and then, almost imperceptibly, he turned away, moving back toward the aisles he had initially passed. My chest tightened as relief surged, tentative and fragile. This pause, brief as it was, gave me the opening I needed. I sprinted toward the exit, guiding a few others I spotted along the way, urging them to stay low and move fast. The automatic doors slid open with a mechanical sigh, and the night air hit like a shock, cool and damp. The parking lot was empty, wet, reflecting the store's lights in distorted, trembling lines. We didn't stop running until we reached the far edge of the lot. My lungs burned, my hands shook, and every instinct told me to keep moving. Behind us, the store remained chaotic, screams fading into the distance, a harsh reminder that safety was temporary, fleeting, and always demanded vigilance. I realized then that this night at Walmart was more than a moment of panic. It was a lesson. Ordinary places, familiar routines, fluorescent lights and aisles stocked with mundane goods, all of it could be transformed in seconds, and survival depended on seeing the danger, believing in it, and moving before it found you. We huddled at the edge of the parking lot, wet from the rain, shaking from adrenaline. The store's lights glowed through the sheets of water, distorted and alien, like a different world entirely. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as officers approached, but the immediate danger had passed. The man was gone, lost in the chaos he had created. Shoppers gathered near their cars, trembling, whispering to one another. Some cried, some comforted children, some simply stood, staring. I stayed low, chest heaving, watching the flood of people leaving behind abandoned carts, spilled drinks, and scattered merchandise. The normal rhythm of Walmart had been shattered, replaced with a raw reminder of how fragile routine can be. When officers finally took statements, I recounted what I had seen. The man, the rod, the targeted chaos, and the frantic crowd. They nodded, typing into tablets and asking follow-ups, but their expressions were neutral, procedural. Outside, the rain had slowed, leaving everything glistening and eerily calm. The rest of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of danger lurking just beyond the edge of perception. It wasn't fear exactly. It was awareness, acute and unrelenting. Every creak of the car, every flicker of a streetlight, every shadow passing across my hotel room walls carried a fragment of the night. I didn't return to that Walmart. I avoided other stores after dark for weeks, took a different route home from work, and stayed alert in ways I hadn't before. The ordinary, I realized, is never entirely safe. Chaos can appear in a familiar place at any time, and it doesn't always announce itself with noise. Sometimes it arrives quietly, observing, calculating, waiting for a single misstep. Months later, I walked into another store, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, aisles stacked with ordinary goods. My hands itched to check exits, to scan faces, to rehearse escape routes. I reminded myself that life goes on, that most nights are quiet, and that vigilance is a choice I could make without letting fear rule me. But the lesson remained. Walmart that night had been more than a store. It had been a reminder that safety is fragile, that ordinary spaces can hide danger, and that survival depends on noticing, choosing, and acting, even in the smallest ways. Some nights, ordinary places teach you extraordinary lessons, and they stay with you long after the aisles return to normal. The Walmart in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, sat at the intersection of two busy streets, its bright neon sign visible from blocks away, even in the heavy summer heat. I pulled in late one Friday night, the kind of night where the air feels sticky, the streets smell of rain and exhaust, and the city hums with an almost imperceptible tension. I needed only a few things: milk, bread, and a bag of chips. But fate had other plans. Inside, the store was alive with fluorescent buzz and the soft clatter of carts. Most of the aisles were nearly empty, aside from a few late-night shoppers and employees restocking shelves at a lethargic pace. The air smelled of cleaning supplies, fried snacks, and something faintly chemical. Walmart's signature blend of artificial comfort. I wandered toward the dairy section first, basket in hand, when I noticed him. A man standing at the end of an aisle near personal care products. Tall, thin, wearing a black jacket with the hood up. He wasn't browsing, he was observing. His head turned slowly, eyes scanning the store in deliberate arcs as if memorizing every exit, every obstacle, every potential witness. I shook off the unease. Late-night shoppers always looked a little off. I focused on my list, moving past canned goods and cleaning supplies, pushing the cart slowly, trying to ignore the prickle at the back of my neck. That's when I noticed her, a teenage girl leaning against a display of school supplies, clutching a binder to her chest. Her eyes darted from aisle to aisle, and every few seconds she pulled the strap of her backpack tighter. She wasn't shopping. She was waiting for something or someone. I hesitated, unsure if I should approach. But instinct overrode hesitation. I moved closer, keeping a casual distance, trying not to alarm her. She looked up at me, wide-eyed, and whispered, "I don't know where to go. He's following me." My chest tightened. The man in black was moving now, subtly at first, then more decisively, weaving through the aisles in her direction. The store's hum, the hum of lights, of freezers, of soft chatter, suddenly felt oppressive. Every footstep echoed. Every glance could mean life or harm. I gestured for her to follow me, leading her toward the back of the store where the employee break room and receiving doors offered potential cover. The man's head snapped in our direction, and for a split second, time slowed. Everyone else in the store, employees, shoppers, continued as if nothing had changed, oblivious to the tension coiling between the aisles. I realized in that instant that this wasn't a random encounter. The store, with its fluorescent lights and mundane aisles, had become a stage, and we were in the middle of a performance that neither of us had rehearsed. Survival, I understood, would depend entirely on awareness, on timing, and on choices made before panic had a chance to take hold. We moved cautiously down the back aisles, weaving between shelves stocked with cleaning supplies and paper goods. The girl stayed close, her hand gripping mine lightly, her body tense. Every so often, I caught glimpses of him, man in black, gliding through the store with a predatory patience, scanning faces, scanning exits, scanning us. He wasn't rushing. That made him more dangerous. A cart toppled somewhere nearby, the clatter loud in the sudden silence that had settled over our path. The girl flinched, squeezing my hand harder. "He's getting closer," she whispered, barely audible. I didn't respond, focusing instead on the layout of the store in my mind. I needed to know exits, obstacles, places to hide. My pulse pounded, each beat marking seconds that felt stretched beyond comprehension. We reached the cleaning aisle, ducking behind a stack of mops and buckets. I glanced over the top. He paused at the end of the aisle, his hood shadowing his face, then tilted his head, as if sensing movement in the air. He moved again, slowly, methodically, closer to the main aisle where we had been moments ago. I realized we had to act. Staying hidden would only delay the inevitable. I guided her toward the employee break room doors at the back. They were slightly ajar, probably left open by someone on a late shift. The girl hesitated. "What if he comes here?" she asked, voice quivering. "He won't," I said firmly, though I couldn't guarantee it. "We just need to get behind these doors. Stay low, stay quiet." We slipped inside, closing the door carefully behind us. The room was small, dimly lit, with the faint smell of coffee and disinfectant. I pressed the girl against the wall, listening. Outside, footsteps echoed. A door creaked, then silence. Minutes passed. The sounds of the store, people moving, carts rolling, faint music from the speakers continued, but the tension didn't dissipate. Every shadow, every shift of light through the door window, felt like a threat. The man had vanished for now, but his presence lingered, a weight in the air, a constant reminder that ordinary spaces could hide extraordinary danger. Finally, a voice came from outside. "Ma'am, are you okay?" A security guard had noticed something amiss. Relief washed over the girl's face, and I exhaled slowly, tension easing but not disappearing. Outside, the man in black was gone. For now, we had survived the encounter. But Walmart that night had transformed into more than a store. It had become a reminder of how quickly normalcy could fracture, and how fragile safety could be when the ordinary turns unpredictable. We stayed in the break room until security confirmed it was safe to leave. The girl's breathing had slowed, though her hands still shook as she clutched her backpack. Outside, the parking lot glistened under the streetlights, puddles reflecting the fluorescent glow from the store like fractured mirrors. The man in black was gone, swallowed by the night, leaving only the echo of fear in his wake. I watched her reunite with a relative who had rushed from nearby, their relief palpable, their gratitude spilling over in frantic words. She gave me a quick, tight hug, the kind that carries both thanks and the lingering shock of survival. I nodded, telling her it was okay, though the weight of the night pressed on me long after she left. The store appeared calm again, as if the chaos had been a figment of imagination. Employees restocked shelves, customers moved through aisles, oblivious to the tension that had just unraveled among them. But I knew better. The fluorescent lights, the neatly arranged aisles, the hum of freezers, they could all hide danger. Safety was fragile, and it could vanish in seconds. As I walked to my car, the wet pavement slicked beneath my shoes. I realized that Walmart had become more than a stop for groceries. That night, it had been a stage, a test of observation, quick thinking, and silent courage. Ordinary places could conceal extraordinary threats, and ordinary people could make the difference. Weeks later, I returned to my routine, but the awareness remained. Every late-night store visit, every crowded aisle carried a quiet vigilance. I noticed exits, scanned faces, and trusted my instincts more than ever. The man in black might never return, but the lesson did. Some nights, survival depends not on heroics or confrontation, but on awareness and subtle action. Walmart had reminded me that ordinary spaces could harbor danger, that every shadow might conceal intent, and that sometimes, choosing to act quietly, decisively, could save a life. And that lesson stayed with me, long after the aisles were empty, long after the fluorescent lights hummed their mundane song. Safety isn't guaranteed. It's earned in moments like these, in choices made when no one else is watching, and in the courage to notice what others overlook.